Welcome to the Bruce Museum and Cultural Centre's Trailblazers exhibit. This traveling exhibit comes to us from the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity in Ottawa, Ontario. And today I'm very pleased to have one of our very own local trailblazers joining us. Spencer and Deni Wright from Make It Right are joining me here today to tell me a little bit about Spencer's journey. First off, Spencer, can you start out by sharing a little bit from your own personal journey?
Yeah, I am a trans man. I have been almost 4 years in transition. Um, we live here in Chesley. We moved back here about a year into my transition. We were living down in Waterloo where we met at college, and it just was heartbreaking to see how many youth were going through the same experiences that I did with the lack of supports here in Grey Bruce. So we had partnered with another couple to start Make It Right, and with that meant relocating back to here to Grey Bruce to be able to offer that. Yeah, I it's been great since we moved back here. It's been definitely a struggle at times. There's no supports here for health wise, mentally, kind of everything.
Mhm.
Why we were big into wanting to start Make It Right. And it's been pretty great though. It's been the supports that have come forward since us moving back here and even since starting Make It Right has been eye opening to say the least. As far as my transition, it hasn't always been smooth sailing. When I came out to my family, it was pretty tough. I was out as a lesbian for 2 years, and that's what they were used to. That was yeah. Um, and when I came out to them as trans, it was different. It was not expected, and it didn't go as planned. I guess you could say. Not that there ever it really is a plan, but definitely didn't go that way. And my family was not supportive at the start, and it's not even that I would really say supportive. They just needed time, and with that meant a lot of heartbreak. As someone who, um, I'm a huge family man, so for me to not have that support was a lot on me. And it was about 8 months to a year before they came around, and we were on the same page, I guess you could say. Um, but yeah, luckily enough, I've had Denny through it all, um, who has been the one person that since day one met me as a female, like pre-transition. Was only a few weeks before my transition started, my testosterone and everything, but since day one has accepted me for who I am and has been there through everything. Um, so yeah, I've been pretty lucky in that sorts. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
That,
um, yeah.
that's an amazing story, and it's an amazingly packed full nutshell that you've got there. There's a lot to unpack with all of this. Um, you talked a little bit about one of the obstacles of this being a challenge for your family. What other obstacles did you face along the way? What else popped up that you weren't expecting that was something that got in your way?
Yeah, so I was huge into hockey. Growing up, I played competitive girls hockey out of Walkerton. So coming out before my transition as a gay woman was super hard because I was playing girls hockey. So to be able to still love the sport as much as I did and to comfortably play my sport was definitely a struggle. But again, luckily I had an amazing support team of girls that we were like sisters. So there was nothing past that, and there was nothing really that went wrong or seemed awkward around that. Um, but yeah, in terms of like,
Or like when you started your transition, like you kind of couldn't play anymore.
yeah,
Talk about that.
so um, I felt awkward essentially going back to playing hockey after because I didn't know how I was going to be treated or how other people were going to perceive me in a dressing room. and I didn't want to have my own dressing room. I just wanted to go and play the sport that I loved. So I did stop playing. Um, I did go for one round of just shinny, and it was really cool. It was really like a really fun experience, just with a bunch of guys from Chesley. But at the same time, I felt uncomfortable, and I think it's just my own insecurities of thinking, when they're looking at me, they're looking and judging my scars. Not I'm probably the least of their worries in the change room, but uh, just yeah, so I have stopped playing hockey, but um, I would say family has been like the biggest obstacle. Just finding that support through there and navigating through all of it. And then my biggest issue is when people have questions, ask me. Um, I'd rather you ask a question and feel uncomfortable asking the question than just assuming something. And it's taken time, but obviously we've gotten to that point where my all of my family has asked questions, and we can now avoid the awkwardness. But that was definitely something that was a huge obstacle, because you couldn't look forward to a family event without knowing how uncomfortable you were going to be the entire time, or how awkward everyone's going to react. So um, we're definitely past that now, and it's not much of an obstacle. But
No, that's great. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And that's a big thing that I hear in many stories when I look at the Trailblazers that we've got here in the exhibit, and as well when I've spoken to some other people who have come out as 2S LGBTQIA at some point in their life. Those comfortable places that it can change, and it is hard, absolutely. Um, were there any unexpected supports you found along the way? Was there anything that came up in your that you didn't expect to be on your side, and there they were?
my grandparents were definitely. I was terrified to tell them that I was gay and that I was doing a transition. Um, but when I came out to them, it was nothing. Like, it was my grandma. She cried, but then it was the biggest loving hug ever. And since that day has pretty much been my like number two supporter. uh, she like jumped on Spencer, he, him immediately, no questions asked. Just as long as I was happy, that was all that mattered. I guess another one would be like one of my aunts has been through everything with me. Um, Coming out to her, I was scared because I came out to her so easily with everything else, but coming out as trans is like a whole new experience. Um, but it was great. She the same thing. It was just like, you know what, if this is what you need to do to be happy, then I support you. I just hope that you're making the right decision for yourself. Um, but I will be here through everything and anything that you need. I guess other ones would be like school. When I came out as gay here in Chesley, the school was supportive. It really didn't mean anything, I would say, like it didn't affect them. So that was a good experience. Um, Coming out as trans in college, the first 2 weeks I was still a female. I hadn't started my transition yet. Um, so when we were doing attendance the first couple of days of school, it was my dead name, which was Madison, and it was constantly being called. And I just said, like, I'm trans. I am about to start a transition on the 20th of September. This was like the 6th to the 9th. And yeah, I prefer to go by Spencer, he, him. And from that, the dean was meeting with me to make sure that everything was going smoothly. The teachers were constantly meeting with me for the same reasons. The classmates, they were all amazing. There was just, I was so nervous. I was so scared of how negative it could all have went. But I honestly didn't have that experience. Um, yeah.
So this was when you were starting college, like this was first year of college,
Uh,
and starting at
yeah.
the same time.
First year of school, I was Maddie and just gay. And second year was when I started my transition.
Okay. I want to ask you, what advice would you give youth that are questioning, and this is whether it's their sexuality or their gender? What do they need to know?
I would say, like, do your research. As silly as that sounds, there are so many things that are unknown. So no, like making sure that you are aware 100% of what you are going to go through and what you're doing essentially is huge. I think being comfortable with the changes you're about to make is big. Um, yeah, I don't know if you have any.
My biggest thing is always to like let people know that family isn't always blood. That some they may not support every decision you make or who you are as your true self, but there is always ways and other people in the community to build that family and build that sense of community. So just to like always like kind of like what just to do your research and find out what other groups are in your area, what kind of things you can get involved in to like meet people and build that sense of belonging. Because yeah, it's not always with your family, it's not always with blood.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you. You kind of talked about this already. How ask me a question anytime is your approach to gender and sexuality and those questions that come up. So when do you think we should be talking about it? And part of this is as a former teacher, and I was teaching when the new sex ed curriculum came out in Ontario, and all of the challenges that it faced when it was first. Uh, should we be talking to kids younger? Should
I
we be getting rid of more taboos? What do you
I
think?
speak to this as a parent because I have a 10-year-old son.
Mhm.
So when I started dating Spencer, he was 6. And at that point, I lived with my sister, and she had a 4-year-old. So not only was I going through the transition with Spencer, but so was my sister, and so were our kids. When he had his top surgery done, the kids were there, they knew what was going on. So my advice is like kids are kids learn through their parents. So however you act and however you react is how they are going to. Um, we only explain things to them as like a need to know basis, and we put it in their language. And I think that's how it should be. I mean, you'd start talking to children about relationships and, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend when they're still in daycare sometimes? So as young as I think get rid of the taboo of, okay, do you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Or just don't ask kids, or do you have friends that are girls or boys? Um, and also just like being but as soon as we start in school talking about healthy relationships, it should always be a conversation that a healthy relationship isn't always with somebody of the opposite gender. Um, so yeah, as soon as it starts talking about school, I'm not even sure the age now with the new curriculum, but yeah, as soon as they start talking about the healthy relationships and the consent and what that looks like, I think it should be talked about.
The last question is a really important one for me, and I'm hoping that the advice that comes out here, things you have to say here, will really help anybody who sees this to take something forward from this. But to build a better community, we need things that move forward. How can I be a better ally?
I think, looking for ways to always be educated, to be in the know of what is, like, the new acronyms, the different meanings behind them, and just being aware of the different individuals that can be in your community. Um, yeah, I think that's like a huge thing for us is that people always think they're educated and that they know so much about different things when the reality is like there's lots of people that ask me, like what's the difference between you as a lesbian and you as a trans man? Um, to me, I always think it's silly. I think I'm always dumbfounded, I guess, when they ask me the question. But it's as simple as that of knowing the difference between that. And again, like I said earlier, if you don't know, just ask. Like, I'm super open in terms of everything, literally, about my life, about my journey as a trans man, as a lesbian. Like, I'm open about it all. But just knowing that when I can go talk to someone, for example, like a counselor, when they tell me that they're LGBTQ specific, knowing that I'm walking into them, I hope that they are 100% knowledgeable of all of it, and 90% of the time they're not. So yeah, that being educated is the biggest thing, and uh, just being supportive and being um, non-judgmental and yeah, open-minded is definitely a big thing for us.
I guess just one thing that like I would add to that is know who you're asking though. Like just because Spencer's open-minded or like open to questions and he's open about his journey doesn't mean that every person in the queer community is. He's way more open about his personal life and his journey than I am about mine. And like that's okay. So just know who you're asking. And I mean, people who are out talking about their journey and doing the education, like usually those are the people who are willing to answer the question. And I guess like for me, if you ask me something that I'm not comfortable with, I'll find you the answer. It just might not be my personal answer.
Yeah, I mean that's the same with anything, right? There's a wide spectrum from introvert to extrovert, and there's lots of them in between. And if you can find somebody way over here on the extrovert side to answer your question for you, fantastic. You're gonna get great details. But that's yeah,
Just know that not everybody is willing to how you get your personal life and experiences.
yeah. So much of what I hear when what I'm hearing in this conversation, but also what I've heard from other um, 2S LGBTQI people who I've spoken with is um, it's not about a definition and one answer to a question either. Um, I mean, we all play so many roles in life. Essentially, you talked about you're a hockey player, you're a family man, you are all of these different things that are all the different hats, all the different roles that you wear, and it's have a conversation with a person is always great advice. And if the conversation happens to be about gender, sexuality, great. If not, then that's fine too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the exhibit, we've printed out and we've posted a number of the resources from the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity. They have a ton of stuff that I know some of the schools in the area are starting to use as well. This is actually one I struggle with myself. I am terrible for hey guys, hey folks. It's just as easy. I even like their suggestion of hey friends.
Yeah.
It's so much more friendly. Um, and then this is one they've actually seen downloaded a lot since we had this here is the pronouns one. And the biggest piece of it, and tell me your thoughts on this as well, Spencer. What if I use the wrong pronouns? Just saying sorry and moving on is their suggestion.
Yeah. I think like when people accidentally mistake a pronoun, it's best to like you said, it'd be like, sorry, like what pronoun do you prefer? Or sometimes it's best just to go with like the they, them, there if you're unsure. Because it's the gender neutral one. It's in my eyes, it's just the easiest.
Also, like when you're introducing yourself or like meeting a new group of people, it also like just shows like a positive space, and it's kind of like a sigh of relief if you say like, "Hi, my name's Deni. I use she, her,"
And just everybody in the room who,
and everybody
yeah,
goes kind of just like for those people who may use they them or like a pronoun who may not fit their exterior, just kind of like a sigh of relief of like, okay, like this is a safe space. Like they actually care about like my pronouns and how I identify.
and then the one physical artifact we have for the exhibit is the flag from the first Kincardine Pride Parade.
Nice.
So this is interesting. When you said you're living in Chesley, I didn't know that. Here's some earlier Chesley Trailblazers, Jack Nesbitt and Jim Egan. And I was actually able to find in our archives a picture of the farm that they lived on, which I thought was neat. Sven Robinson, like there are some very high achieving people here. So by being an inclusive community, you gain so much because like we've got a judge and we've got amazing artists and we've got musicians and all these very high achieving, really interesting people. And you lose that when you're not an inclusive community.
Just the fact that you guys are doing this and like recognizing the history behind it is like fascinating, I think, and just like shows in like the open-mindedness of the community and like that. I mean, this would never happen 10 years ago even.
The challenge though then is it's not linear and it can go away too. And so it's so important to doing things like this, to keep doing things like you're doing, and just making sure that that our community keeps on a positive trajectory.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much for this
Thanks for having
opportunity.
us.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this.